To comprise one half of the obligatory voodoo tracks for this essay, I could have easily chosen D'Angelo's most well-known tune, untitled How Does It Feel? After all, how could you not fall in love for D'Angelo's complete surrender, his knowing that, in love, there is no space to hide from your lover's gaze? You might as well put it on the line, your lust as a holy offering. All that's for no one's eyes but yours, your lover's, and God's, the only one that can forgive such luxuriousness, but never licentious in nature. I don't know what it says about my own relationship with intimacy, but my favorite of all slow jams in this masterwork of Black American music, although more guarded in its slightly psychedelic and gospel-tinged funk, highly indebted to Sly and the Family Stone's There's a Riot Going On, soothes the listener into accepting a less than moral tale of two already committed former lovers reuniting. One More Gin is less about the absolute surrender you must give into in lovemaking, but something far more liminal, the feeling when you cross eyes with someone you were deeply intimate with in the past. The less than favorable feelings from your separation have given way to mellower, more bittersweet ones. Both of you just left work, are heading to a loving home, but yet decide to hit up the nearest bar for some gin and tonic, which turns into one more gin, then another, and the fact you promised your partner to be home by 7:30 p.m. suddenly becomes irrelevant. Love songs about imperfect or even consensual yet immoral romance often are the ones that capture my imagination in the most poignant way. Sade's The Sweetest Taboo, Daft Punk's Something About Us, Frank Ocean's Self-Control, and so many others. However, the song One More Gin feels the closest to in spirit is the Velvet Underground's Pale Blue Eyes. Although the Lou Reed written tune is far more restrained and far less carnal in its display of affection, well, at least until its final verse, much like D'Angelo's Slow Burner, it tricks us into rooting for a union destined to wreck the lives of both lovers. Depicting irrational passion and a guilty consciousness with potent honesty. If there's a canon of imperfectly perfect love songs, One More Gin hangs Riley in it. It is only appropriate that, in the stunning compendium of Black American music's history that is voodoo, just think of the chain gang melodies over DJ Premier-made beat of Devil's Pie, containing some of the most potently erotic ballads ever put to tape, that its final song is a lullaby dedicated to a newly born black child. Believe it or not, initially, D'Angelo wasn't keen on having it on the album. The deliberately dreamy, childlike sound of Africa features D'Angelo playing an uncovered Fender Rhodes emulating a glockenspiel, or maybe more attuned to the song's Afro-centeredness, sounding more like a kora or a kalimba. Backing it, we have a groove gently jacked from Prince's I Wonder You by Questlove, and an acoustic bass played by D himself, ever the Prince-inspired musical polymath that he is. The sheer gentleness of the backing track is contrasted by the first verse of the song, in which D'Angelo emulates the first ever race talk that he will have with his and Angie Stone's child, the spark that generated not only this song, but also the arresting Send It On, briefing him on the immense injustices done to Africans and people of their descent throughout history, and what it could mean for his life. The second verse acts simultaneously as a benediction for the child and a deterrent more powerful than the H-bomb for anyone who may think of harming him. The blood of God is my defense, let it drop down to my seed. The innocence of the song's sound becomes more consonant with its lyrics as Dee and his almost one-man band takes us to its bridge, showing the infinite happiness brought upon by his child to his life. No matter how far from their ancestors' lands they may be, no matter how unjust the place you find yourself being born into is, you can still find a place called home in the nearness of those who you hold dear. Africa is simultaneously the most particular and universal of lullabies, a place where ancient geographies and bloodlines are remembered in reverence and mourning, yet its spiritual and symbolic power is used to power a new utopia of the possible, one no form of discrimination can touch and no grander superstructure can oversee. In a way, I get why D'Angelo wanted to leave Africa out of voodoo. Its sweetness feels too pure for the eyes of the public. The loving gaze of a father towards his child is simply not a matter for the masses. But I am immensely grateful that Questlove persuaded him into including the song as the perfect closer for the perfect album. If there is one musical moment I would have gladly given away my life to see materialized, it's the jam session scheduled between Miles Davis and Jimi Hendrix, cancelled due to the latter's untimely passing. Musically, they were already converging ever closer in sound and intention. Miles's music was ever more psychedelic rock inspired in its electric era. A good part of it was his then wife, Betty Gray Davis's influence. Jimi was making advances towards jazz and funk with his band of gypsies, and the work that would be posthumously released as The Cry of Love in 1971. In both artists' work, as their music became denser and more rhythmically complex, it served as a backdrop for the tensions of the Black Power era and the Vietnam War. The song we're talking about today, although decades removed from Davis and Hendrix's time, is sonically and spiritually the closest thing we ever got to their collaboration. Everything you need to know about 1000 Deaths is already said in its first minute or so, even before D'Angelo opens his mouth. First, we have sampled a vitriolic speech from Nation of Islam and New Black Panthers member Khalid Abdul Muhammad, denouncing the erasure of Jesus Christ's non-Europeanness by hegemonic Christianity. He is only half right though. Rather than being of sub-Saharan descent, it is most likely the prophet was born and preached in lands that are rightfully of the Palestinian people. The revolutionary side of Christ, however, is made abundantly clear in Muhammad's inflamed delivery. Later, the voice of Fred Hampton, chairman of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party and leader of the Rainbow Coalition, is heard, advocating for a multiracial union of working-class people in the name of peace, a peace that can only come at the cost of a struggle. Unfortunately, Hampton's gall to confront the powers that be had Chicago police killing him at 21 under the auspices of the J. Edgar Hoover-led COINTELPRO. They could not have another black messiah like Martin or Malcolm rise, leading their people to the land the US promised itself to be. Yet, that is exactly what the praying hands and closed fists of D'Angelo's third album's artwork, Black Messiah, yearn for. The desire for transcendence against a violent, immanent world is expressed in the dirty, chaotic, even slightly industrial-flavored funk rock of the track, as D'Angelo puts himself in the shoes of a God-fearing, reluctant first-time warrior. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Is to kill for your liberation sinful or holy? Is to always turn the other cheek Christ-like or cowardly? These questions run through the song's protagonist's mind at breakneck speed, as he is about to experience something that'll reshape his moral and spiritual standings for the rest of his life. The dialectic between the material and the spiritual world has always been a theme in D'Angelo's music. Just look back to the street corner preaching of Devil's Spy. But here, we get a first-person view of a man's political and spiritual war in all its unclear details, reinforced by the track's deliberately cloudy vocal mix by Russell Elevado. Here done to a result simultaneously unnerving and rapturous. Despite its title and the presence of songs such as the aforementioned 1000 Deaths and the Charade, Black Messiah is still only partially a so-called political record. Like any other work in D'Angelo's catalog, one of his main fixations is the apolitical politicking of desire in all its complexities, but never forgoing emotional impact in exchange of wit. And maybe more than in Voodoo's Untitled, no song is more intoxicating in its capacity to portray romance in all its layered glory than Really Love. The introductory part of the tune sounds less like so-called neo-soul, an industry-fabricated label D'Angelo vehemently rejected. One may suspect it came to be due to The Matrix's success coinciding with the heyday of artists like him, ERYKAH, BADU, and Maxwell, and more like the overture for a movie about two estranged lovers meeting each other in Spain, indicated by its cinematic strings, flamenco-style guitar, and Gina Figueroa's narration, somewhat reminiscent of One More Gin. However, after this point, I feel that this song's disarming candor makes describing it almost a betrayal. The lack of pretense in D'Angelo's falsetto and lyricism is sorely missed in today's songwriters and vocalists, whose work is oftentimes so clouded by second intents and hidden ideologies, trying to sound smarter, sexier, even more honest than they actually are, but incapable of expressing the devotion and desire it displayed in a song such as Really Love. Have we, and yes, that includes me, as I too have been writing songs of my own and recording demos, been too spoiled by our own egos that we cannot drop the kayfabe? Yes, writing and playing songs is a form of performance, but it requires a certain level of non-performativity to be truly affecting. We want to be immanent gods like D'Angelo and any other of our favorites appear to be, yet we often forget that it's their humanness, the crack letting the light shine through, that made us fall in love with them. Case studies of fallen angels trying to get their wings back and failing each and every time more beautifully than the last. I was supposed to talk about Really Love, but maybe it's best if we let the song inadvertently speak for itself about our own shortcomings better than we ever could. As I started planning for this essay, I had the idea that someone at Rockstar Games had listened to Black Messiah's second to last track, the funked up country of Fedor, and thought, let's get D'Angelo to make a song for Red Dead Redemption 2. However, I found out that it was sort of the other way around. D'Angelo's actually a massive fan of the game, more than I ever knew, says Ivan Pavlovich, director of music and audio at Rockstar Games, the company behind Red Dead Redemption 2 and other gaming hits like Grand Theft Auto. He reached out to Pavlovich for an unnamed intermediary. He would come in here, Rockstar's New York City office, and just play the game. We weren't even talking about doing music, Pavlovich says. When D'Angelo comes through, he shows up at midnight and he's playing the game until 4 in the morning. Each time he's just like, it's incredible. It just blows his mind. He's such a fan. I have never seen someone that excited. D'Angelo's enthusiasm emboldened Pavlovich to ask the singer if he was interested in contributing music to the game. I shouldn't have been so surprised in finding out that D'Angelo is a fan of the Red Dead games. It isn't just about the excellent mechanics and attention to detail displayed in them, but their stories center around morally great characters falling in and out of grace that must have captivated him. a God-fearing man from one of the most violent cities in the United States, later battling drug addiction and the temptations of his newly found status as the US's premier sex symbol in the early 2000s. The ballads of John Marston, Arthur Morgan, and the Van der Leen Gang must have found resonance in his own voice. The placement of Unshaken in Red Dead Redemption's 2 narrative elevates the Afro-country ballad to its rightful place. First, we're greeted by the original version of the tune, written by Rocco De Luca, himself inspired by Indian gurus Paramahansa Yogananda's teachings, and performed in an unusually low register by D'Angelo, as if he's channeling the spirit of an African griot lost in the Wild West. This version of the tune is played in Arthur Morgan's ride to Shady Belle, succeeding his and Dutch Van der Leen's gang escape from the Isle of Guarma, a point of no return for the main character's trust in his mentor and leader. A second version of the song, called Crash of Worlds, does not feature these vocals, but rather a choir guiding Arthur's spirit towards the heavens at the end of the game's main campaign, for the high honor players that is. The reluctant outlaw was able to lead his friend John Marston and his family into a safe escape. Although Arthur fails to physically defeat the perfidious Michael and to confront the megalomaniacal Dutch man-to-man one last time, after so much grief and wrongdoing, his soul can finally fly free. After D'Angelo's untimely passing in 2025, this song feels like an uncomfortably comforting send-off, being his last solo track released while alive, a warning/blessing of an elder towards the youth as they'll face a world more unjust and incomprehensible with each day. It's been reported that, at the time of his diagnosis with pancreatic cancer, D'Angelo was working on a successor to Black Messiah. Questlove also stated that he and his family are working on compiling a posthumous LP. However, even if it ended up being this final offering, Unshaken would still reaffirm his irreplaceability. May the immortal wisdom imparted by this song remain strong in all of us, for this too is a way of keeping Black American music's Messiah legacy alive.